Welcome back to Korean history, and we're in week one. This is where we're starting the course in what we're calling the prehistory of Korea. So if you see your syllabus, the week one says prehistory of Korea, geography, creation, myth of Dangun, and has the readings that are going to go with this week. So the question that is often asked is, when does Korean history begin? It's not like a date like 1776 in the United States that you can say, there it is, because Korea has a very long history, and much of it is shrouded in mystery because so many of the records have been destroyed by wars and conflicts and disasters over thousands of years in the Korean Peninsula. So there are some options that we can answer this question with. You see this explored in the Kim text also, but I want to highlight a few of them. One option is to say Korean history begins about 400,000 years ago, because archaeologists have discovered artifacts. You can go to archaeological sites in South Korea and see the sites of villages that are hundreds of thousands of years old in Korea, dating from the Paleolithic period. So those artifacts are in museums in Korea. There's evidence that people have been living there continuously since about 400,000, 500,000 BC. Mind-bogglingly long time ago. Most Koreans, though, claim that about 5,000 years ago is the founding of their country. And so if you speak to Koreans, they will often mention at some point, our country has a 5,000-year history. What are they talking about? Well, that's based on the official founding of the first kingdom, Gojoseon, by King Dangun, and the official date that was written down 3,000 years later was 2333 BC, which incidentally is about 50 years later than the official crowning of the first king of China. So there seems to be some relationship between the younger brother and the bigger brother in that sense by the time this history is written down. But unfortunately, there's no evidence for that date. Archaeologically, historically, the estimates of a historic Dangun are much later, as you'll see in the timeline that goes with this week. Another option for the start of Korean history, of something distinctly Korean, is somewhere around 2,000 years ago, which is when, or actually a little bit more than 2,000 years ago, around 700 BC is when kingdoms in the Korean Peninsula start to appear in Chinese records. And so a lot of historians look for around that date for the founding of the Gojoseon kingdom by, it is believed, a historical king named Dangun. So most scholars would not doubt that there was a king Dangun. They just wouldn't necessarily go into the details of the mythical story of Dangun, and they wouldn't put it in the time period that a lot of Koreans claim, or the official Korean history claims, this 2333 BC. But that's an important date to remember, because that, in the mind of Koreans, is when the country was founded. So in the identity and the mind of Koreans, Korea is 5,000 years old. And every year, Koreans celebrate Foundation Day, remembering that date for the date that Dangun, King Dangun, founded the first kingdom of Korea that later became Korea. The location of that kingdom was actually in what we would call today Manchuria, and just the northern bare piece of North Korea. It wasn't completely in the peninsula, but Nonetheless, it is considered the first Korean kingdom, Gojoseon, and we'll be talking about that next week, that kingdom. For this week, I hope you can just get a sense for the span of time that we're talking about in the prehistory. The history of Korea would begin when Koreans start to write their own history, and that's not going to happen until almost the turn of the millennia, right around the end of the BC or BCE period and moving into the AD or CE period. That's around the time that Koreans start to write their own histories that appear in books and are accessible. The story of Dangun, though, is very important for Korean identity, both in the South and in the North. And that's something that may surprise us. Although these two modern countries are technically still at war with one another for the past 70 years or so, they both look to Dangun as their founder. And North Korea claims to have the actual tomb of Dangun as a tourist attraction in their own country. And there's also a claim that Dangun later founded his kingdom or moved his kingdom near Pyongyang, which is very convenient also for North Korea in their own sense of their history as a country. But as you're reading the myth of Dangun, pay attention to the details. You read something. There's animals, and they're eating this, and they're talking, and they're becoming human, and it doesn't make sense from a modern perspective. But leave all that aside for a minute and just focus on the details of the story. Ask yourself, what does it mean? What does it imply that Dangun's mother is a very patient she-bear who becomes a human and marries a son of a sky god, and so the King Dangun that is born from their union is both divine and human. But what does it mean that it's the patient she-bear who manages to become human, whereas the tigress, with all her strength and ferocity, doesn't make the grade and gets kind of left out of the story from then on? What does that mean what does that imply for the kingdoms of the Korean Peninsula over 1,000 years ago in their relationship with Big Brother China in those days? And what does it mean for a country like South Korea in its relationship with modern China and modern China's imperial aspirations nowadays? So that's something to think about. Geography is also very important for us to consider in this phase as we're looking from now on at the history of Korea. Some scholars have called Korea's existence today a miracle. That it wasn't absorbed by China, that it wasn't absorbed by Japan, it wasn't just wiped off the map in all the conflicts and wars that have happened over the millennia in East Asia, Northeast Asia. And so that miracle is in part due to the geography of the area. And I have included a map for your consideration this week. So you can take a look at that map and think about what features of Korea, of the Korean Peninsula, might have helped protect Korea over thousands of years from the constant threat of being just absorbed into some larger kingdom or empire over these thousands and thousands of years. I'm also including a timeline that I hope you'll find helpful for the dates. Once again, you don't have to memorize these dates, but it's a good idea to sort of put them in your mental computer as we're going through the course to see how Korea develops over time with the various kingdoms and empires that rise up, control, get thrown out of the Korean Peninsula. So I hope you have a great week and enjoy the readings.